The $4,200 your grandmother has been sending to your joint account every month since you finished nursing school. I trust it has been a great help during your training. My grandfather's voice cut across the long walnut table at Canoe Restaurant like a scalpel through gauze. The view of Lake Ontario 20 floors below suddenly blurred in my peripheral vision. I counted in my head. 4,200. Every month. 7 years. $352,800. I looked across the table at my parents. My mother's complexion drained to the color of the linen napkin on her lap. My father became very interested in his Ontario-raised lamb. My younger brother, Tyler, kept scrolling through his phone, either oblivious or pretending to be. I swallowed the mouthful of Niagara Riesling I'd been nursing and turned back to my grandfather. Grandpa, I've never received a single transfer. The clink of cutlery at the next table felt suddenly enormous. My mother reached for her water glass, and her bracelet caught the candlelight. Before I explain what my father admitted 20 minutes later that put him in handcuffs, tell me in the comments which province or country you're watching from. I want to know how far this reaches, because what I'm about to tell you happened to real people in a real city, and it almost killed me. I didn't throw anything. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at my mother's wrist, where a Tiffany tea bangle sat gleaming against her skin like a small polished accusation. I knew exactly what that bangle retailed for at the Yorkdale location, because I'd stopped in front of the window the previous February on my way to a shift at Toronto General, $2,400. That same week, I had been splitting a 10-day prescription of insulin glargine across 14 days because my benefits hadn't kicked in yet at my new ICU posting, and the out-of-pocket cost at Shoppers was almost $400 for the cartridges alone. My mother, Diane, noticed me looking. Her other hand drifted over the bangle, covering it the way a poker player covers a tell. They hadn't just stolen money from me. They had turned my rationed medication into a status symbol. My name is Hannah Whitmore. I'm 29 years old, and I'm a registered nurse in the cardiac intensive care unit at one of the largest hospitals in downtown Toronto. My entire working life is spent watching the numbers on monitors. Oxygen saturation, mean arterial pressure, the tight little spikes of a QRS complex. I can look at a patient and tell you within 30 seconds whether they are stable or whether we're about to call a code. Sitting at that table in the private alcove of Canoe, I was running the same assessment on my parents, and every single vital sign was crashing. Most people, when they catch someone in a lie this big, start shouting. They flip the plate. They throw the wine. I grew up with my mother, so I knew better than that. Diane Whitmore responds to volume by getting calmer and colder. She feeds on your hysteria. If you actually want to end her, you don't raise your voice. You hand her a microphone and step back. I reached into my bag, the one I'd bought secondhand on Poshmark 3 years ago for $80, and I pulled out my phone. I didn't announce what I was doing. I opened Instagram, tapped live, and set the phone against the slender vase of white peonies in the middle of the table. The lens peered between two blooms, catching my father's flushed cheek and my mother's bangle and my brother's downturned face at the exact right angle. In Ontario, only one party to a conversation needs to consent to being recorded, and I am always one of the parties to my own life. I did not feel the need to warn them. "Honey, my father," Greg started. He still calls me honey when he wants something, and the word slid across the table coated in grease. "Your grandfather is a little confused. We have been managing that money on your behalf. It was always intended for the family. For all of us, you understand." "Managing it," I repeated. "Flat. Even." The monitor in my head beeped once. "Like a portfolio?" "Exactly." My mother jumped in, grateful for the rope. "Hannah, you've always been, a little reckless with money. All those nursing union dues, those rented rooms, that cheap car. We wanted to make sure there was something left." The viewer count on my phone rolled past 40. Past 90, past 200. "My car," I said slowly, "is a 2011 Mazda 3 with rust on the quarter panels. I bought it with my own signing bonus from Bayshore. The nursing dues come out of my own paycheck. I pay my own rent on a basement unit in Parkdale. The landlord only shovels the walk when someone complains to the city." "What exactly have you been managing?" My father reached for the wine. He'd ordered a Bordeaux, a second growth from a vintage I recognized from the list. $340 a bottle. I watched his fingers, soft from years of golf in Muskoka, tighten around the stem. "These dinners," he said, the confidence creeping back into his voice the way it always did when he thought he was winning. "They matter, Hannah. This is networking. This is the family brand. Your grandfather understands that." He took a long swallow, almost smug now. "We invested that money into assets that appreciate. The cottage on Lake Rousseau, the membership at Granite, Tyler's tuition at Western." "Tyler's tuition," I said quietly. Tyler finally looked up from his phone. 22 years old, Ivy Business School, the golden boy. He had the grace to look at his plate rather than at me. At the university that told me my scholarship package wasn't enough, so I went to George Brown instead, I said. I turned to my brother. Tyler, what does a year at Ivy cost right now? Hannah, come on. It's not my fault. What does it cost? He mumbled something. My mother answered for him like she always did. It's around $60,000, before residence. But that is an investment in Tyler's future, not a luxury. He's going into finance. $60,000, I said. My entire nursing diploma cost $12,000. I paid for it by working night shifts at a long-term care home during the pandemic. I wiped bodies while people died alone because their families couldn't come in. I saved for 2 years. And Grandpa was sending you $50,000 every 12 months, supposedly for me the entire time. The live stream counter ticked over 700. I could see the comments starting to scroll in a column down the side. What? Oh my God. This is a crime. Call the cops. That's fraud. Canadians, we need to see this. I looked back at my father. And the cottage, the one I've never been to. You were always working, my mother said quickly. Every long weekend you took extra shifts. It wasn't as though you'd have come. Because I couldn't afford to take time off, I said. My voice was still low. Because I was paying down my student line of credit at 6.95% interest. Do you know what it's like to pick up a double on Canada Day while everyone else is at a cottage, Mom? And then scroll through Instagram on my break and see you and Dad and Tyler on the dock at Rousseau, tagging the property with that cute little hashtag you made up. Whitmore Waterways. My mother's mouth opened and closed. Were we supposed to stop living because you chose a demanding career? She finally said. Her voice had climbed half an octave. We never told you to become a nurse, Hannah. We told you to go into pharmacy or dentistry. You chose the harder road. I chose a useful road. And now you're throwing this tantrum in front of your grandfather at a restaurant. I watched her say this with something approaching wonder. In the center of the table, my phone glowed. 1,100 viewers. The comments were a river. The Tiffany bangle, I said, keeping my tone conversational, almost curious. When did you get it? She blinked, surprised by the turn. It was a gift. From Dad? Yes. For what occasion? Our anniversary. Last May. I nodded. Last May. I remember last May. I was in a merge for 3 days in May, Mom, because I'd developed a stress-induced arrhythmia from working so many overtime shifts trying to save for a down payment. I called you from my hospital bed. Do you remember what you said? She did not answer. You said you couldn't come because you and Dad had dinner reservations at Soto, and he'd been planning it for months. You said I should try to rest and that I always catastrophize. I was lying there in a hospital gown with a Holter monitor on my chest, and you were getting that bangle. My father set down his wine glass hard enough that the Bordeaux trembled against the rim. Hannah, that is enough. Oh, Dad, it is not even close to enough. I gestured at his glass. That bottle. $340. Do you know what $340 bought me last winter? An emergency furnace repair in my basement apartment, because the landlord said it was my problem even though it legally wasn't. I didn't fight him because I couldn't afford a paralegal. Grandpa thought he was paying my rent. You drank it. My father's mouth worked. Tyler had put his phone face down on the table, finally understanding that something real was happening. Hannah, listen to me, my father said. He was switching tactics now, trying soft and reasonable. Your grandfather is almost 80. He has good days and bad days. Whatever he thinks he sent, we can work this out as a family. We can sit down with a financial advisor, write a schedule. It does not need to be so dramatic. There is no schedule, my mother interrupted. And here she made her first real mistake. The mask she wears at family dinners, the one she puts on at the Rosedale Junior League fundraisers and the Whole Foods on Avenue Road, actually slipped. I watched it fall. Listen to me, Hannah, she said. Her voice had gone cold, businesslike, almost bored. We didn't steal anything from you. We made a decision. Do you want to know why? Fine. Because you were never going to do anything spectacular with it. You were always going to be comfortable and tired and ordinary. You were going to marry some paramedic and buy a townhouse in Ajax and have 2 children and a Honda. That money would have disappeared into a mortgage and a minivan and been wasted. The table went completely silent. Tyler is going to run something, she said. He's going to build something. He has presence, Hannah. He has polish. He is going to take this family into the next generation. That money was not wasted. It was directed. I stared at her. Somewhere in my chest, that same arrhythmia I had developed the year before kicked in, a hard skipped beat. But I did not break eye contact. She kept going, because narcissists always keep going once they've started. They confuse your silence for agreement. When you were 8, your grade 2 teacher called me. She said you were conscientious, steady, a hard worker. She was right. You are all of those things. You are a workhorse, Hannah. Workhorses do not need investors. They need to keep working. Tyler is a racehorse. Racehorses need stables and trainers and feed. You do not bet on the workhorse in the Queen's Plate. She picked up her wine and took a small, satisfied sip, like she had just delivered a TED Talk on household economics. I glanced at my phone. The viewer count had flipped past 3,000 and was accelerating. The comments had turned into one long scream. My father, thinking my silence meant my mother had won, chimed in. She's right, kiddo. You are resilient. You are strong. We did not want to ruin that in you by making things soft. You have built character out of this. If you had been handed that money at 22, you would not be the woman you are. So I should thank you, I said. You should understand, he said. I pretended to think about it for a moment. I ran my index finger around the rim of my own water glass. You are right about one thing, I said slowly. I am a workhorse. I show up every shift. I hold the hands of people dying of heart failure at 3 a.m. I do chest compressions on fathers whose children are watching through the ICU glass. I do not miss. I do not fail. I don't pay dividends to people who asset strip me, though. I turned my head slowly toward the other end of the table. My grandfather had not said a single word since his opening question. He sat with his hands folded over his dessert plate, the same way I had seen him sit across from hundreds of lawyers and bankers and board chairs over the years. Grandpa Arthur had built a commercial real estate portfolio in Hamilton and Burlington from one property in 1974. He had fed, clothed, and educated everybody at this table. And he had just listened to his own daughter explain that she had been running a 7-year scam using his money and his granddaughter as collateral damage. Grandpa, I said, I think they are finished. He lifted his eyes to mine. Yes, Hannah, he said. His voice had the quiet of ice forming on a river. They are finished. He reached down beside his chair and set a leather document portfolio on the table. It was the same one he had carried to my grade 12 graduation and to my nursing pinning ceremony, scarred at the corners, the monogram AWW barely legible anymore. He did not slam it. He set it down the way a surgeon sets down a scalpel on a tray before the first cut. Gregory, my grandfather said. My father's head snapped up at the use of his full name. Are you familiar with the term forensic accounting? Arthur, for God's sake, this is a family matter. We don't need. It is the practice, my grandfather continued, as though my father had not spoken, of using accounting to find things that people did not want found. It is the specialty of an old friend of mine named Mr. Desjardins at a firm on Bay Street. I sent Mr. Desjardins a list of wire transfers 3 weeks ago. The day I realized that Hannah's thank you notes to me over the last 7 Christmases have been suspiciously generic. He opened the portfolio. Inside was not a stack. It was organized, tabbed, colored paper clips by category. Every month, he said, pulling out a single page. On the first business day, the trust I established at BMO Private Wealth has wired $4,200, after tax, to a joint account at TD. The account was opened in Hannah's name and Diane's name in 2018, ostensibly to help Hannah manage rent payments while she was in nursing school. Hannah was not given access. The password and debit card were controlled by Diane. My mother had gone very still. 24 to 72 hours after each deposit, my grandfather continued, pulling another sheet. The funds were transferred out of that joint account and into a numbered Ontario corporation, 2, 5, 6, 4, 4, 3, 1, Ontario Inc., of which Diane and Gregory are the sole directors and shareholders. He slid the page across to me. The numbered company Hannah owns a property on Lake Rousseau. It also makes lease payments on a 2022 Range Rover and holds a membership at the Granite Club. It is how your Aunt Karen's Christmas card last year mentioned the new boathouse in Muskoka. I noticed. My father's mouth was a thin white line. Arthur, he said, this is a civil matter, an accounting disagreement within the family. We can resolve this quietly. I'm certain you would prefer that, my grandfather said. He pulled out a third sheet. Are you familiar with the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 331? Theft by a person holding a power of attorney? Section 336 is also interesting. Criminal breach of trust. When a person in a position of confidence, such as the signatory on a joint account established for the benefit of a named individual, diverts funds for their own use, the offense carries a potential sentence of up to 14 years. You cannot be serious, my mother whispered. Section 380, my grandfather went on. Inexorable now. Fraud over $5,000. A minimum 2-year sentence if the value exceeds $1 million, which, Diane, when we include the appreciation on the Rousseau property and the compounded interest on the funds, it does. Dad, my mother said. The word cracked. I had not heard her call him Dad in 20 years. She has always called him Arthur in public, like they were colleagues. Dad, please. Not here. Not like this. There was a version of this evening, my grandfather said, and for the first time his voice softened, just enough that I heard the grief underneath, where you told the truth, where you looked your daughter in the eye and said you had stolen from her, where you returned what could be returned and begged her forgiveness. I gave you that opening when I asked the first question. I watched you both lie anyway. I watched you call her a workhorse at a restaurant in front of me. I have no more daughter tonight, Diane. Do you understand? Tyler had started crying quietly. Not for me, for himself. The property on Rousseau, my grandfather said, turning a page, was purchased with traceable funds originating from Hannah's trust, under the doctrine of constructive trust, as established in Petkus versus N. Becker, where property is acquired through the misappropriation of another's funds. Canadian courts will impose a trust in favor of the victim, regardless of whose name is on the title. My lawyer, Miss Iqbal at Osler, filed for an injunction this afternoon at the Superior Court of Justice on Queen Street. It was granted at 4:15 p.m. Hannah, the cottage is yours. He slid an envelope across the table toward me. Inside were documents and a small silver key on a ring stamped with a loon. The Range Rover was leased through the same numbered company, he went on. It was repossessed from your driveway in Forest Hill approximately 2 hours ago. My mother made a small sound, like a balloon deflating. The balance of the stolen funds, with interest, has been secured by way of a Mareva injunction against your personal assets, including the Forest Hill house, which in any event is mortgaged to an amount that exceeds what you will have left, once Hannah's civil claim is satisfied. My father tried. One last time. He swung wildly. Hannah, he said, and his voice was shaking, but with rage now, not fear. You think you won. You listen to me. I took out a line of credit in your name 3 years ago. $50,000. Your name. Your sin. If you do not agree right now to drop this, I will default on it and your credit will be annihilated. You will not get a mortgage. You will not get a car loan. You think you're going to live in that cottage? You will not be able to insure it. The table froze. Then I laughed. Not a nice laugh. A surprised one. Dad, I said, you just admitted, on camera, to identity theft under Section 402.2 of the Criminal Code, in front of Grandpa, in front of the staff of this restaurant, and in front of I glanced at my phone 17,600 people who are currently watching this live. I turned the phone around so he could see. He looked at it. His face went the color of unprimed drywall. My grandfather, without turning around, said, quite calmly, Officers, I think we have what we need. I had not noticed them come in. 2 uniformed Toronto police officers, along with a third in plainclothes, had been standing just inside the entrance to the private dining room for at least a minute. Later, I would learn that my grandfather had arranged with the restaurant manager for their discreet entry at a signal. The signal had been the moment my father admitted to opening the credit in my name. Gregory Whitmore, the first officer said, you are under arrest for fraud over $5,000 and identity theft. You have the right to retain and instruct counsel without delay. He did not resist. He stood up slowly, like a man who had aged 20 years in the last 8 minutes, and let them turn him around and cuff him. The handcuffs were covered with a small black cloth sleeve to protect his wrists. I don't know why I remember that detail. My mother was arrested at the same time. The officer who walked her out asked her to please leave the bangle on the table as potential evidence. She complied silently. They led her past the open doorway of the main dining room, and I saw, through the opening, a woman from her book club look up in disbelief, a fork halfway to her mouth. Tyler sat in his chair, crying openly now. My grandfather looked at him for a long moment. Tyler, he said, you are 22. You are not charged with anything. But you ate at this table for 7 years, and never once asked where the money came from. I want you to think very hard about that between now and your next visit to me. If there is a next visit, Tyler nodded and kept crying and said nothing. The restaurant manager, a kind woman with a small silver pin shaped like a canoe, came over and asked if she could pour me a fresh glass of wine. I said yes. I had barely touched the one in front of me. My hands had finally started to shake. That was fine. Nobody needed me to be steady anymore. My grandfather reached across the table and took my hand. Hannah, he said. Grandpa, I'm sorry. I should have checked sooner. I trusted your mother because I was her father, and I did not want to imagine that she was capable of this. That was my failure. You paid for it with your insulin and your sleep and your 20s. Grandpa, I have set up a new trust, he said, and now his eyes were wet. It is in your name only. The cottage is yours. The proceeds from the civil claim will also be yours. There is no adult between me and you anymore. If you need something, you call me. Not an intermediary. Me. Is that clear? I nodded. I could not speak. One more thing, he said. The trust has a clause. 5% of the annual income is directed to a scholarship at George Brown College for a nursing student who is the first in their family to pursue healthcare. You will chair the selection committee. Is that agreeable? I laughed, wet and ragged. That's agreeable, Grandpa. Around midnight, I stood on the dock at the cottage I had never seen. I had driven up Highway 400 inches my rusty Mazda, while the lawyer on the phone read me the property survey. The boathouse was new. The air off Lake Rousseau smelled like cedar and cold stone. My grandfather had offered to follow me up, but I told him to sleep. I wanted one night alone with this thing that had apparently been mine all along. The live stream had hit 41,000 viewers by the time I ended it in the parking garage of the restaurant. The comments, the ones I scrolled through sitting in my Mazda before starting the drive, were overwhelmingly from women. Women who had mothers like mine. Women who had been the workhorse in their own families. Women who had finally been told, out loud, that they were the sturdy sibling, the dependable one, the one you could skip. Dozens of them wrote the same sentence in slightly different words. Thank you for letting us watch someone win. People will tell you family is the most important thing in the world. They will tell you blood is thicker than water. They will tell you, at funerals and at Thanksgiving, that you only get one mother. I have come to believe something different. Family is not a given. Family is an ongoing vote. Every person at every table gets to decide, every day, whether they are still worthy of the word. Sometimes the vote comes back no. Sometimes the people who made you are the people who would have let you die to buy a bangle and then told you it was for your own good. The day you stop calling that love is the day your real life begins. I stood on my dock, and I watched the moon on my lake, and I listened to my lungs work. They worked. They still work. And tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., I will be in the cardiac ICU at work, because the patients in bed 4 and bed 6 do not care about my family drama. They need a nurse who shows up. I'm going to keep showing up, just not for the people who thought my steadiness meant they were safe to rob. If you made it to the end of this, tell me in the comments, what did your family teach you about money that you had to unlearn? I read every single one.